Hello, everyone, and welcome to the VIDA podcast, where we help educate military veterans and their spouses on opportunities in Web3. Our plan is to host a series of industry leaders, many of whom are veterans or spouses themselves, so that we can learn about their journey down the crypto rabbit hole while understanding opportunities for transitioning veterans in the industry. I'm Chris Perkins, president of CoinFund. I'm a combat Marine veteran who spent 15 years on Wall Street before transitioning into the crypto space. And before we begin, I would like to thank our sponsor, Luca, who's dedicated their time and resources to make this podcast possible. For our 28th episode, we'll be speaking with Marine Corps veteran DevonJames, Technology Director of Web3 Working Group. Welcome, Devon.
Thank you so much.
Well, tell us about your background, man. How did you get here?
How did I get here? Well, I started as a nerd long before I was a Marine. My very first job was I was doing dial-up tech support at an ISP in 97, 98. So like when most people thought that the whole internet was AOL and a few people had started to learn that there's this independent internet that you can connect to from your local little city, I had the calls from the people that really wanted to get on but couldn't quite figure it out. You know, we had people that would like, I got the modem and it's sitting here on top of my computer and why isn't it working? And it turns out it's not connected. This is long before there was wireless technology. So it was interesting that I happened to have that experience because now 2 to 3 decades later, I see a lot of the same a lot of similarities with this incredibly important emergent technology that is really hard to use, and it's still early, but people can tell how important it is. But then I joined the Marine Corps. Actually, I was going to just use a ROTC program and do a reservist thing and just drill on the weekends. And so I thought, hey, you know, if I'm just doing this 2 weeks a year and a weekend a month, I might as well blow stuff up. So I went infantry, and my civilian boss at the time, the guy that kind of talked me into doing it, was a forward observer in a Marine Corps straight leg infantry unit. And so he said, if you join, I'll come back and I'll train you. Turned out it's not that straightforward because I thought, you know, as soon as I got to my unit, I'd be able to become a forward observer. That's not the case. It takes a couple of years. You got to put in the work. But actually, funny enough, when I got in, I then found out that my grandpa was a forward observer, an air forward observer in World War II. And I only found this out after I became one myself. So it was a very interesting job, especially for a nerd, you know, that likes physical activity. So you have a whole lot of very stressful, you know, 30-mile marches and stuff with the 33-pound mortar tube and all this kind of stuff. But then you get to have some fun with the nerdery, with the little, you know, all the little dials and stuff when you do Fire Direction Center, and then go out on your own with the radio and a pair of binoculars and call in fire missions. So I did some really great stuff, especially during training, a lot of really fun stuff. But I had joined in January of 2001. Thinking, you know, time of peace. And then, of course, 9/11 happens, I think, a month after I graduated School of Infantry, and the world changed, of course. So we got activated right away. We were set up for just a QRF mission on the West Coast. And eventually our battalion commander kind of got bored of that and thought, you know, there isn't, like, honestly, our job was like, if there's another attack, we're going to go do crowd control kind of stuff. And our battalion commander decided this is boring. This isn't really putting us to the kind of work that we should be doing. We're a straight leg infantry unit. Let's focus on that for a while. And we just trained really just ridiculously hard. And we were right next to first division schools. And so we actually got to compete in some division schools comps, and we won on a few different fronts. And so that got DC's attention. And they said when they were getting ready for the invasion of Iraq, for the first time since World War II, they put a reserve unit on the front line. So we were part of RCT-1 going right up the middle, right into Baghdad. And that was a weird experience that I never expected to have. Certainly never expected to have. And did a little bit more after that, you know, one more deployment to Djibouti, Africa in 2006, the third front of the war on terror. And then really that all just, that to some degree, that very much led into why I became really interested in decentralized technology when I discovered it. I discovered it in 2013 or so. And just having an awareness of how much reality can be distorted by information not being permanent, or not being able to really weight it when it comes across the internet and when it comes across these, you know, very few distribution channels, meant I was very much open to the idea of, oh, wow, permanent things that can be cryptographically proven are going to have so much importance in the future. And so I just got incredibly excited about that back in 2013, 2014, and now an OG crypto person as a result. We've been in this for quite a while now. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Can you tell us? By the way, I was a Ford observer as well for
Were we
much of my.
really?
Oh yeah,
Oh, that's fantastic. That's
I
fantastic.
was an artillery officer, so a
Right
little
on.
bit
Oh,
different. I
awesome.
was
In the
always, but I was always a weapons company when we were at the infantry. So like, I humped that 81 millimeter mortar
mhm.
more times than I can count. So
Yeah,
totally know your pain, and I feel it today.
props. Yeah.
So do you have any like formative moments in the Marine Corps that shaped you going forward? You talked a little bit about the permanence of information.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, okay. Realizing the awesome power of the U.S. military or any advanced military when it comes to taking on another nation was stunning. You know what I mean? Like being a part of an invasion was stunning because it was very fast, very powerful, very destructive. They didn't have a chance, honestly. Like we kept on being told, like we're going to see resistance here, we're going to see resistance here. There's a line of tanks that's going to stop us here, da, da, da. And there was, it was a 4 week fight or so, three to 4 week fight. I talk about it as basically it's driving from San Diego to Las Vegas over the course of 3 weeks. So you're not moving fast, when you compare to your normal kind of a drive to Vegas, but you're taking over a country as you go, and that's an awesome power to kind of realize. But also, and I was 22, 21. I certainly didn't appreciate at the time the importance of where we were. This is literally the cradle of civilization, and it came out in the news in kind of this recent decade that ISIS went specifically destroying historical cultural monuments because they wanted to destroy them. We destroyed a lot of stuff like that unintentionally just because of how powerful our systems can be. Um, and there's something to that. The degree of loss of both infrastructure in the major cities themselves as they started to get hit, and then historical knowledge, as a side effect of this kind of destruction when you happen to be in the cradle of civilization. Both of those were really resounding. And also, I've had a great deal of respect for our military. Growing up, knowing my uncle telling me stories about my grandfather in World War II and stuff like that. Like he was the very first, or amongst the very first allies on the German side of the Rhine. He discovered something called the Bridge at Remagen that wasn't supposed to be up. He and his pilot found it, and they discovered it, and they got something like 100,000 troops across before it was destroyed. And so my whole family had these moto kind of patriotic stories about how important that military service is and stuff like that. So I've always had a great deal of respect for it. But coming to realize the difference between the effectiveness of a military, and it was absolutely impressive the entire time through, like at opportunities for people to get really emotional and no longer effective, they kept it together and did an incredibly important and impressive job. So this is an awesome power, but unfortunately it felt like it was being wielded, especially in retrospect, by people that didn't respect that power. The civilian leadership that sent us to war, whether they knew that there was lies involved or whether they were being manipulated by other people who were creating the lies, I don't know. I don't want to try to claim that we can figure that out, but there were lies involved. There was half truths, there was not entire truth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so you look back on it and you go, we worked really hard. We lost tens of thousands of people, and you look at the 22 vets a day that take their own lives. That's way more than we lost in combat at this point. Like that's way more. That's horrifying. And we just kind of destroyed a country to where two of them, actually more than that at this point, that have had a hard time coming back since then. And if it's for the right purpose, that can be a very important and necessary thing to do. If it's not, if it's for political, short-term means, if it's because, they're being dishonest about what their intentions are, that's really important. And so kind of the things that resonated with me were both the importance of infrastructure and how everything is based on it. When you destroy a country's infrastructure, it can take a very long time for them to have any amount of growth again, any kind of impact, positive impact on the world, et cetera, um, prosperity, et cetera. And also when the systems of information delivery are manipulated, horrible things can happen, through nothing but the best of intentions of everyone along the way. That's tough to sit with, you know what I mean? Especially when you're a part of it and you're like, there's nothing about my own actions or any of the actions of the people around me that I took issue with. It was the very fact that we were. It was. When I think about this, I'm reminded of the Smedley Butler quote that "war is hell," and
Where's the racket?
or the war is a racket. Yeah, that if you go really deep into it, it's he's right that like it's an incredibly powerful thing. If you use it effectively, it can be good. But if it's a racket, if it's being used by corporate forces, that's horrible. You need to guard against that kind of thing happening. And I like I was kind of saying, I think that's a big reason of why the technology behind blockchain and or behind Bitcoin with blockchain and decentralized technology is so important. The more that our sources of information have been centralized, in the past 2 decades, or 3 decades now, we've gone from 500 sources of news that most people take in down to, I think it's 4 or 5 companies at this point, and now maybe Warner Brothers and another one, or Paramount, are going to merge, and we're going to be down to like 4. Fox doesn't really has one channel. It isn't really a media system itself. Disney is pulling in absolutely everything. Comcast is taking everything else. So like we're down to like 4 corporate boards that control almost the entirety of our news flow, and that's terrifying. Like the amount of power there in so few people's hands, when people think they have diversity of ideas and thoughts going through stuff, and it's very, very concentrated.
All right, so you come back from the war. Tell us about your transition, back into civilian life, and then ultimately into Web3.
Yeah, I started. Well, I first kind of went into a little semi-career in the visual effects industry. I was a compositor in Hollywood for a while. I did 3D and compositing on a handful of different TV shows, some movies. I worked on 2012. I worked on Benjamin Button. I worked on a really great show at the Jim Henson Company called Sid the Science Kid, and I absolutely loved that. It was really a
Yeah.
blast. Um, but I got out in 2009 ish. I kind of picked, I was very, very lucky. I picked just the right time. The industry was very much fracturing and splitting across the entire world. And I think it was that year that Life of Pi won for the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, while outside a whole bunch of its visual effects artists were picketing because they had not been paid for like 6 months and then they got laid off. And like, so the industry was just completely devastated. And I picked just the right time to kind of leave it. And it was devastated largely because the rest of the world was getting onto the internet, getting high speed connections to the internet, good quality computers, and had the talent to take care of a whole bunch of stuff that used to necessarily be in Los Angeles. And so we were competing with the entire world and we couldn't really keep up, kind of thing. So I went entrepreneurial for a while. I did 2 different startups. We started with a company called Happy Owl Studio that designed products for, as the iPad came out, we were one of the first iPad cases to announce, and we did really well. We sold with Apple for a while, but we were manufacturing over in China. And after a year and a half or so of doing that and going over there a few times to kind of get to understand the whole process and meet my factories and stuff like that, I just kind of decided that it didn't really align with our values as much. We wanted very much to kind of use higher quality materials that are in better. I mean, I wouldn't call it slave conditions at all. Like China is doing a very good job of taking care of its people very effectively. And like while we were doing this, the average cost for a manufacturer, like a skilled worker in manufacturing, doubled in China, which kind of started to price it out. But also, like China was becoming like joining the first world as far as consumers kind of stuff. So good for them. But they were using materials we weren't really entirely happy with, and we really wanted to employ domestic labor and stuff like that. So we came up with our next product was a cash box basically for an iPad and Square. Like we kind of recognized that it's $10,000 for kind of the lowest cost for a POS system, and so a lot of like coffee shops don't do that kind of a thing, but Square had just come out and the iPad had just come out. So if we built a little frame around both of them in a cash drawer, your average coffee shop or something like that could get into it. And that was great. We built it out of bamboo in a local kind of microfacturing kind of situation, and it was a lot of fun. It was very rewarding. Got some great coverage, got a bunch of great customers, but ultimately it was just way too expensive. We priced ourselves out of the market. Square entered the game with their own piece of hardware at that same time, and they were selling theirs for like $100 or $200 made out of plastic, and ours is made out of bamboo with, I don't know, 60 hours of labor each time, each one kind of thing. It was like $1,600. So we decided, let's see if we can subsidize this by trying to sell credit card processing service. So if we, get someone on board using our credit card processing service that we're going to take a slight cut from, we can give away the hardware for practically free, kind of thing. And it turned out that was near impossible. Businesses never want to change their credit card processor, especially not to some kind of startup. But it introduced us to payment processing and to the pains and challenges and horrible difficulty of payment processing and the cost of it and how much fraud there is, et cetera. And that opened our eyes. I had a friend that worked at Bitcoin Magazine at the time that had been just sharing constantly. This is 2011, 2012, 2013, all the time talking about Bitcoin, and I just ignored it. I don't know why. I wish I hadn't. But it just didn't resonate with me. It didn't make any sense. And then once I understood how bad the payment processing system was, now I started to get it. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And I went into the rabbit hole and went deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And so about January of 2014, I'd spent about a year excited about Bitcoin, wanting to buy, Butterfly Labs mining hardware and just all these different kind of things. And I had an opportunity to pitch an investor an idea for a reusable mining hardware, like where all of the hardware that doesn't need to get thrown away doesn't get thrown away, and the ASIC itself is upgradable. And in order to do so, I decided, I'm going to go ahead and read the white paper. I'm not thinking it was beyond me, and just watched explainer videos and stuff like that. And I finally read the white paper, and it just blew my mind. My wife says I haven't had a full night's sleep since then. Just realizing how brilliantly it was put together and how it changed absolutely everything, and how it could very well, it does a very good job of permanently storing cryptographically signed data. The data in Bitcoin is financial transactions, but it doesn't have to be. It could be any number of other things. And so I had the idea for two projects right away, based on kind of the things that I was aware of in the world and what was interesting to me. One called Archive Chain, to kind of store a permanent record of whatever you want to put up that stays there forever. What I was thinking at the time was Twitter was such a wonderful place for me to learn about Bitcoin, like crypto Twitter. Yeah. But I could find out right at that moment what the conversation was. But if I wanted to kind of remind myself what the general conversation was 6 months ago, that wasn't possible. I could look for a single tweet, I could look for a word, but I couldn't see what a timeline was a few months ago. And I thought that was really valuable. So I wanted to create an archive of that. And then the other half of it was something I called MovieCoin, that was, let's do media distribution over the internet. I was aware of BitTorrent and how incredibly powerful or effective of a mechanism for file distribution at incredibly low cost, or really zero cost in that case, was. And I thought by putting that together with kind of a pointer and a descriptor inside of a permanent blockchain, you could solve media distribution. And ultimately, those kind of merged into a single concept that we called the Decentralized Library of Alexandria. When we first announced it about 10 years ago. So we've just been that kind of evolved. We presented it to the DWeb in 2016, and Sir Tim Berners-Lee was there, and he said he thought it was a very thrilling idea. He really liked it. He thought we should change the name. So we thought, okay, well, let's describe it as what it really is, and it got a new name called Open Index Protocol. And the whole idea was just permanent blockchain storage of any type of media with kind of a standardized formatting, JSON formatting, so that any number of applications can read it. And we've experimented with property records in Wyoming. We did news records. We did scientific records with Caltech. So a lot of fun experimentation that eventually got to the point of discovering what the DPIN market is now doing. Fills in a lot of those holes. And so I've kind of had it on the back burner. I think eventually we were obviously too early, we built it and we released a version that didn't have any mechanisms to kind of filter out pirated content. And I was terrified the night before that we were just going to, the pirate market was going to discover it and think, hey, this is permanent. They can't come after us. So we're just going to be inundated with a whole bunch of pirated movies the next day. And it turned out the exact opposite happened. It took a week or two for anyone to put anything up, and it we were way too early. But I feel like we're finally at a point where there's awareness. Like honestly, at the time, people didn't really believe me when I said that the internet could be censored because no one was really actively doing it. And now it's so common, everyone knows
Yeah.
about it. Everyone believes you, you know. So there's awareness of the problem, and there's emergent awareness of potential solutions. Like, have you heard of the term DPIN yet?
Of course.
Okay, yeah,
We've,
that we
so we're
finally have a term for it is
yeah,
making is really making it resonate with people, and that we have all these
100%.
solutions for storage, for transcoding, everything. So I'm excited. I think we can finally make this stuff happen.
DPIN is one of the most, we're investors, one of the most exciting verticals, particularly at this stage in the space. So,
Absolutely.
it's a fascinating space and something that, we're big believers in, like you are. All
Excellent.
right. So tell us tell us about what it means to be technology director of the Web3 working group. What is your day to day then?
So Web3 Working Group is a nonprofit that was started 2 years ago, specifically to advocate, to kind of have a voice, give a voice to that sector. And this is before DeepIn had a name. We were talking to Sammy as he, not in the conversation as he came up with it, but part of those conversations when he came up with the term. We were all kind of batting around different ideas. I kind of liked the idea of disco, decentralized or distributed compute. We knew that all of the attention was going to the financial aspects of things, both in the public's mind and in Congress's mind, as they finally decided to kind of take on crypto legislation and create some amount of, new laws or clarity around this kind of stuff. And you're likely only going to get a single shot at it. There was only one time that Congress really took any care of the internet and decided what they were going to do with it. And the next 20 or 30 years of how it developed in the United States and nowhere else really was because of the decisions made at the time in the late 90s. And so we kind of felt like this is going to be our moment. There's going to be a couple of year period when Congress finally writes a few bills. And we want to make sure that while they're doing work to protect against scams and financial related stuff and anything else like that that they're bound to do, that they don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they really understand that the infrastructure of the internet itself can be re-decentralized, and that the services that we rely on, like just for this call to do the video transcoding, there is some centralized service involved. There could be a decentralized protocol instead. The file storage for the file that ultimately will get pushed out for people to watch, that's done on some Web 2 company that very well could be a protocol. And there's a lot of people that are interested in the problem of censorship and interested in the problem of kind of monopolistic behavior from big tech that aren't yet aware that there are technological solutions. And a lot of people think that only laws can fix these kind of things, but they're not a very effective way with such a large thing, especially such a large thing that doesn't belong to any one country. The internet is its own country functionally, you know what I mean? And obviously websites and apps and stuff like that need to be compliant with local laws, but you can't force the whole technology to change because one country decides that they want to go a different direction. Like a great historical example of this was in the mid 1800s, as a few people are having the idea to kind of turn the locomotive into a car that can drive on streets. England was very much leading the way. They were just doing a fantastic job, way out ahead of everyone else. And their legislators decided, or their government decided, this is too dangerous. I'm sure someone got run over or something. I don't know. This is too dangerous. We have to be really, really careful. We have to be incredibly cautious. And so they started these things called red flag laws, where
Yeah.
when you get to a city, you have to slow down to like 3 miles an hour and put someone 20 yards out ahead with waving a red flag and warning everyone, here comes an automobile. And one of the most hilarious ones that was actually being considered in the United States was, if you're going to pass a horse, you have to park the car behind bushes and disassemble the car so it doesn't spook the horse. So these are stupid. These are really stupid ideas in retrospect. But they took them in the United Kingdom, and it completely destroyed this nascent industry for 3 decades. Meanwhile, Germany comes along and Mercedes-Benz invents the vehicle because they just kind of took the space that was given to them. We could make that exact same mistake now, just because we have the most Web 2 companies, because we have such an enormously large tech industry, the assumption is we can come up with new rules and they will have to be complied with, because people will want to stay here, companies will want to stay here. And the truth is, developing these days is just, there's no infrastructure involved. You just need a laptop, a nerd and a laptop, and it's really easy to move around the country and move around the whole world. And so there's, especially as there are more and more countries that are standing up and saying, we like this technology, we want to embrace it, we want to actually, make some sandboxes from laws that might get in the way, et cetera, et cetera. It's very inviting. And so unless we do it right, we're going to lose the industry. And that's tragic, because I like living in the United States and I don't want to have to move, but this technology is really important. And I know I'm not the only one that believes that. I've talked to a whole lot of people that either did choose to start up elsewhere, or are considering moving. And so
Yeah.
unfortunately, some lawmakers don't understand that. And so part of what we do is we educate lawmakers about what this stuff does,
Mhm.
what the potential side effects of being overly burdensome on it. Like the Treasury recently asked for comments about some of their rulemaking, and one of the rules was, if you're using some sort of a decentralized service, like say for example storage, you have to, for tax compliance, you have to figure out your cost basis on the token when you bought it, and then whatever the market value is now, and that's fine. But you also need to figure out what the fair market value of the service that you got was. And so in some cases, that's just really, really onerous and difficult to do. In other cases, like in the case of Arweave has a one-time fee for permanent storage. It's at least 200 years, and the way that they develop the whole thing is it's very likely that that will actually be forever. There is no analog for that in the normal tech world. So some of these rules simply can't be complied with, and that would be a problem, because it just means US users wouldn't be able to use them, and that's terrible. That's a tragedy. And honestly, the rest of the world often waits for us to adopt something. So if we get on board, if Web 2 developers get on board with this thing and start using it, the rest of the world will too. So we very much need to lead the way on that. So what we do is we educate about these projects, or these protocols, the existence of them. We advocate for their adoption. And lately we've been doing work to kind of advocate for them to stay legal in the United States. We find that to be incredibly important. We have a lot of great allies in Congress and the Senate right now, but it's incredibly divided, and so it's a really hard pull. So we just try to educate them as best as possible and give them as much resources as we can, so that they have the best chances of making it happen.
Well, I guess I should start by saying thank you for your service and your continued service. I can't agree more that advocacy, engagement, it's so important at this point in time. I'm on the Global Markets Advisory Committee of the CFTC as an example, and the lawmakers, the policymakers, they need to hear from us, because in many cases they want to do the right thing, but they get hit with a lot of, to your point earlier, a lot of information, and they have to figure out what's real and what's accurate,
Yep.
and a lot of nuance. So thank
Yep.
you for fighting a good fight.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, man. So what advice would you have for a vet who wants to come into the space?
I would say recognize that it's not just a development community. Like, yeah, there's a lot of code writers, but there's a lot more than that. This
Yeah.
technology can redefine a whole bunch of different verticals and a whole bunch of different industries. And so there are people in every possible profession that are working on Web3 in some function or another. So one, don't believe the stories that it's nothing but scams. There are plenty. Yes, absolutely. Every emergent technology, opportunists latch on to and play their games. Don't let that make you shy away. Look deeper at the technology. Look deeper at what it can do, and see if it resonates with what's important to you. And if it does, there are opportunities out there. There's a lot of companies that are hiring, especially kind of as we're moving into this next bull market. It feels like we're right there with the ETF approval, and we're at 46, 47 today, kind of thing. Um, Bull markets, there's a lot more hiring, there's a lot more startups and stuff like that. So there's massive opportunities to work in the space. Um, don't hold back. This is an emergent phenomenon, especially the marriage of Web3 and AI, and then add on top of that kind of VR, with Apple coming out with their Provision thing later this year, and et cetera. This is the next $1 trillion industry. Be a part of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So you talked about DePIN earlier on. You talked about the intersection of AI and crypto. those are two, massive investment themes right now, and frankly, for that reason, areas of growth. What excites you the most about Web3? If you were a vet, would you be focusing on one of those verticals?
That honestly, the overlap of AI and specifically deepen, because like a lot of people that talk about the scary aspects of AI, they look at the Hollywood version, and the Hollywood version doesn't really understand technology very well. Let's be honest. But what they don't recognize is that their presumption is that this is all based on some central point of failure, some single company, some single computer, some the knows everything supercomputer. It's unlikely for that to develop in the first place, but also we can push it in a decentralized direction, um, by putting your training data on a public blockchain like Arweave, by using a GPU rental market like a cache to get access to the training hardware, to the high end GPUs that would otherwise cost $20,000 to buy. You can instead rent them for $2 an hour in an open marketplace that can't deny you based on them not liking you or something like that. There is freedom to use all the hardware necessary in order to do AI in a decentralized way, where it's a bunch of individual agents that serve us rather than the super Google AI. And everyone can tell that we don't want the super Google AI. We don't want OpenAI to be the singular dominant force, because any single dominant force is going to apply its biases in a way that doesn't meet the needs of the marketplace. AOL is the perfect proof of that. There was a time, like I said, when people thought that AOL was the internet. I think there was a stat that like 60% of all the CDs printed in the world in the late 90s were AOL discs. They had the chance to completely dominate the internet, but they were a single company, and their best efforts meant they could only reach one portion of the market. There's going to be some people that just don't like the interface that they chose for their stocks, or any number of reasons, that as soon as you have a competitive marketplace, HTTP, with any number of applications built on top of it, they can do all the same things that AOL could, but with diversity of approaches, uh, who built it, what it looks like, how it works, etc. That's way easier to be adopted. And we're going to see the same thing, I think, when it comes to taking AI and building it on top of decentralized protocols, specifically kind of DePIN and Bitcoin. Um, we're going to see the exact same thing. We're going to see a lot of competition. We're not going to have a single monolith that controls everything. And thank goodness, thank
Yeah,
goodness, because we won't have the doomsday scenario, and it'll really level up how powerful every single person can be. And that's wonderful.
yeah, it's a big question, right? Open versus closed, transparent versus controlled, right? So
Exactly.
when you're looking at model training, when you're looking at data, so I think it's going to be a pretty big battleground, and we're already seeing the fight unwinding. So
Hmm.
super interesting times, ton of opportunity, and I'm with you.
Absolutely.
I'm of the school of thought that it's not time to decelerate. The genie's out of the bottle. We need to
Exactly.
accelerate, and not
Exactly.
only the tech, but also the policy, right? And also the
Exactly.
risk management and the ethics. Like we should
Yep.
be studying. So to your point, beyond the technical side. So
Hmm.
awesome, Deb. Any last thoughts?
Oh, I don't know. I talked about a whole bunch. Nothing in particular. No, I'm just
No,
I'm bullish. I'm very very bullish. I think we're gonna have a great cycle. I think we have a good chance that we're gonna have a good set of laws, and that we're learning quickly from other areas. So even if we kind of get it wrong as a slight misstep, we'll correct it, because the competition is there. And I am excited. I think AI, I've been in this for 10 years. My wife often looks at me and goes, "Why is it taking so long for such incredibly important technology to be adopted?" But it's hard to remember. It's easy to forget that the internet was 10 years old before they even, had the idea of DNS, or I think 20 years before the idea of DNS. And so these things happen, but then there's every once in a while there's a mechanism that accelerates things, and I think HTTP was the mechanism that accelerated the internet, and I think AI is the thing that's going to accelerate Web3 and Web3 development and Web3 adoption. So it's
awesome.
just the right time right now.
I agree. And how can people connect with you?
I'm personally on Twitter or X at DevonJames. The organization is on all socials and YouTube at Web3WG. Please check out we've made a basic series on YouTube just to kind of help lawmakers. As we would get in touch with them, they would say, I've got one of my staffers trying to kind of get familiarized with this stuff, but everything that they find when they try to find out, what is blockchain, is either way too in the weeds and just the industry talking to the industry with jargon and all this other stuff, or no details at all. And so we set out to solve exactly that, where it has a whole bunch of technical details, but it explains them with analogies and stuff like that. So we start from the beginnings with public key cryptography and the history of blockchain, and get through Bitcoin and Ethereum and get into some of the deep end projects. So please check those out. They're a resource for the public. That's why we built them. And give us feedback. What other kind of things should we be creating content to educate with?
Excellent. Well, really appreciate your thoughts today, Marine. I also I happen to enjoy talking to other Marines, particularly in Web3. Thanks
Semper
again for
Fi.
thanks for your service.
Thank you,
as
Chris.
well.
You too.
The work that you're doing and engaging and advocating, I can't understate it enough. It's a big deal, and it's so crucial at this point in the evolution of these markets.
Thank you.
Also wanted to thank our sponsor, Luca. Luca is actually the CEO of Marine as well. So shout out to them. Maybe
Fabulous.
I can introduce them sometime.
Excellent.
And for those of you who are interested in learning more about VIDA, please connect with us on LinkedIn or Twitter. And if you have ideas about who else we should have on the show, please hit me on Twitter at PerkinsCR97. Thanks again, Devon. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Chris.